info lesinayo kodwa info lekufanele sinakekele siphinde siyivikele eminyakeni lengemashumi lamathathu entsandvo elinyenti asingakhotsa lapho sisuka khona ne-African National Congress yethu ngekusebenzisa i-African National Congress sinemfundo yamahhala ema-RDP bantu bakhelwe labasikati bangene elikomiti lephalamende ngelizinga noma ngelinani leliphakeme sikhululekile kuthi sibe ngiloko lesingiko livoti liyithulusi eliqinile kakhulu lelakhiwe ngumuntu ukuthi aphule itintetane tekugcilwadwa kwakhe ngithi khetha kahle lo mudla uvotele i-ANC #IamTintswana
That's why I said it.
Yeah.
Oh, bemfuna ukuzama mic la asebenza u2.
Kuzophela. Sunday morning.
So this is the one, yeah? Okay. Sharp. Yes, you say? I shouldn't use them anymore.
You can hear you online. I'm a little bit further on the table.
Okay.
I'm going to start off by allowing our most important. There's feedback. There's feedback. Sorry, apologies about that. I'm looking here at the role of the program director is basically just to do opening and a bit of housekeeping. The welcoming will be done by Comrade Sizwe Hlope. So I'm just formally opening the program, and I would also imagine that he is going to be the one who's going to acknowledge our guests who are here in our midst. The most important guest that we have here today is Comrade Jeff Radebe, and we also have Comrade Justice Ngiti, Comrade Krish Naidu, our councillor candidate, Comrade Ahmed, and his beautiful wife, Yasmin, and all other comrades, you are acknowledged. With that said, I'm just going to then allow our Comrade Sizwe Piri to do the welcoming remarks.
Amandla. Amandla. Viva NC, viva. Long live the undying spirit of INkosi Albert Luthuli. Long live. Long live. Thank you, Program Director. Sibonge umndeni wakwaLuthuli onathi on the platform. Our keynote speaker, former NEC member, ANC veteran, prominent witness in the reopened Luthuli inquest. The provincial, regional, zonal, the entire leadership of the African National Congress and our alliance structures. Comrade Snuki in absentia, president of the ANC Veterans League, a member in good standing of our branch. As Comrade Program Director has mentioned, panelists, we have Comrade Krish. We have also on the line Mr. Sandy Luthuli, Comrade Taina Powers, Comrade Justice Luthuli. Our branch stands tall with a humongous task on its shoulders on what INkosi Albert Luthuli stood for on his entire life. I extend a warm welcome to each of you gathered here today for this inaugural INkosi Albert Luthuli Memorial Lecture. We gather under a theme that demands absolute honesty, the apartheid lie, and the Luthuli verdict, truth, justice, and the democratic promise. INkosi Albert Luthuli Umadlanduna was a leader of deep moral clarity and unwavering integrity. His leadership taught us that a burden of service is a path. As he said, the road to freedom is via the cross. And that leadership should not be a platform for privilege. He led the African National Congress during a period of fierce sacrifice, guided by the foundational truth that South Africa belongs to all who live in it. Today, as our movement speaks of self-renewal, self-correction, and returning to its foundational values, Luthuli's life presents us with an unsparing mirror. Renewal cannot be a mere slogan or an exercise in political rhetoric. True renewal requires what Chief Luthuli lived every day. That is strict accountability, moral courage, absolute selflessness, and unshakable commitment to the poor and the marginalized. The Luthuli verdict challenges us to bridge the gap between the democratic promise of 1994 and the daily realities of our people today. It calls on us to confront historical lies, while refusing to excuse present failures. As we listen to today's lecture, let us move beyond passive remembrance. Let us allow Chief Luthuli's enduring legacy to critique our current path, sharpen our moral conscience, and push us toward genuine regeneration. In conclusion, I would like to quote our struggle hero, INkosi Albert Luthuli, when he said, open quote, "The world is now a neighborhood. Although, unfortunately, people are not sufficiently neighborly." Welcome to INkosi Albert Luthuli branch, Ward 32 in Zone 13, Joburg region. And thank you for being part of this vital national conversation. Amanda, long live undying spirit of INkosi Albert Luthuli. Long live. Long live.
Amanda. Comrades, ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, good evening. On behalf of the African National Congress, the INkosi Albert Luthuli branch, I welcome you all here today. On behalf of the African National Congress, I welcome you all to this historic occasion, the inaugural INkosi Albert Luthuli commemoration lecture. May I kindly request that everyone takes their seats, especially their comrades still on the other side of the wing. Comrades will join us as we proceed. Comrades, as the comrade Antipam would have indicated, our program is now and having been officially opened by the comrade convener. We would like to acknowledge members of the National Executive Committee, both present and those who have submitted apologies. We would like to welcome the veterans of our movement as represented by Comrade Moring, as well as Comrade Ungit. We also wish to acknowledge the leadership of the ANC in Greater Johannesburg, particularly those who are able to submit apologies who had been invited here tonight. We welcome leaders of the zone. We see some of you here. We appreciate your support, comrades. Your presence is duly noted and appreciated. And community leaders, members and supporters of the African National Congress, ladies and gentlemen, to all of you, we extend our revolutionary greetings, as well as to comrades who are joining us virtually. Comrades, I have a very, very simple task and a very efficient one as well. Mine is to welcome you and to state the purpose of tonight's gathering. Tonight is not merely another gathering. We assemble in honor of INkosi Albert John Mvumi Luthuli, the President General of the African National Congress, a Nobel Prize laureate, and one of the foremost architects of our liberation movement. This lecture also takes place in the shadow of the landmark 2025 judicial findings into the circumstances surrounding his death. Those findings, comrades, have deepened our understanding of history and renewed our collective responsibility to defend the truth of our liberation struggle. This lecture, therefore, seeks not only to remember INkosi Luthuli, but also to deepen political education, strengthen organizational consciousness, and inspire a new generation of cadres. Your presence here tonight, comrades, affirms that the memory of INkosi Luthuli continues to inspire discipline and activism in defense of our movement and of our democracy. So we thank you. Comrades, in terms of the agenda, we are going to now proceed, Comrade Chair, with your permission, to the reflections on the legacy of Comrade Luthuli. And on this one, we are going to have Dr. Rowlands, who is coming from the UNISA Chief Albert Luthuli Research Chair. And this, comrades, is one of those institutions that we would have come across as a branch as we searched the length and the breadth of the country to find organizations, movements, whether the civic organization as well as academia, who are inspired and continue to honor the legacy of Comrade Luthuli. He will just provide a brief overview and just explain some of the work that is done outside of the ANC, comrades, in the name of INkosi Luthuli. So I'll just sit down and give him 10 minutes. Thank you, Leadership.
Comrade, good evening. Good evening. My name is Dr. Emmanuel Rollins. I'm a researcher at the Albert Luthuli Research Chair at the University of South Africa. The inquest into the death of Chief Albert Luthuli was reopened after 57 years. The apartheid era finding held that Luthuli died in 1967 after being struck by a train. Now, he died in 1967 after being struck by a train. The European inquest and the subsequent High Court ruling in 2025 rejected that account. The account found that Luthuli died resulted from an assault from the apartheid security structures. In fact, one of the pathologists that came to discuss, to reflect on these issues with us, told us that they found out in the record that Luthuli has a bruise here and in his hands here. So he chose that he was being assaulted, so he tried to protect himself rather than being smashed by a train, as the account is being stipulated. Now, the case sits along other reopened apartheid-era inquests, including those of the death of Ahmed Timol, Neil Agate. Now, these cases have set precedents for overturning apartheid-era judicial findings through renewed forensic analysis, archival review, witness testimonies, and constitutional principles of accountability. The KwaZulu-Natal High Court ruling does more than correct the record for our liberation leader and Nobel Prize laureate. It raises questions about how apartheid-era archives were produced, who controlled the official accounts, and how legal, medical, policing, bureaucratic institutions were complicit in state violence and misinformation. It also reopens debate on accountability, the referral of justice, and how South Africa construct historic memory nearly 3 decades after the apartheid ended. The apartheid-era records, including court findings, medical report, police records, death certificates, often function as instrument of state power rather than neutral documents. Reading these archives critically means asking whose voice were preserved, whose were excluded, and how bureaucratic processes were used to legitimize violence. I call this violence, when it is so selective in the archival records of whose voice have been preserved and whose voice have been excluded. The inquest also exposed a tension between two justice paradigms: the post-apartheid South Africa. The Truth and Reconciliation Commission emphasized restorative justice through truth recovery, amnesty, and national reconciliation. Whereas the reopened inquests, such as the one of about Luthuli, speaks about foregrounding criminal accountability and legal responsibility instead. Now, the tension is clear. What the apartheid era was able to do and to silence the voices, give misinformation, keep wrong records of what has happened in that period. And now, after 30 years of democracy, to show that democracy is working, now these are being upturned, revised, reviewed, and the truth is coming out. Now, about Luthuli's son, one of the representatives of Luthuli, said something. He said that one of the critical questions we should ask is, why did they kill Luthuli? They didn't kill him for a long time. Why did they choose to kill him at the time they killed him? He said 5 years before he died. What was he doing that irritated them? What was he doing that made them feel like he's now a consign? They must take him out. Those 5 years of his life are critical that we must research on if we want to keep his legacy alive. Now, I conclude with this. One lesson we must learn from Luthuli in my readings is that Luthuli is a man that is ready to pay sacrifice. And I encourage comrades that one quality that they should uphold from Luthuli is the quality of sacrifice. Luthuli was a teacher. He left teaching and became a chief. That is big sacrifice. Leaving a paid job and going into chieftaincy. And then while he was settling down, being a chief and then holding a political position, it wasn't easy for him now to leave the chieftaincy and take on the mantle of ANC's leadership position. House arrests, all is about sacrifice. He was ready to let go for a higher call. He was ready to go to the next step to fight for South Africans. Let my people go. Let my people go. So I urge ANC renew a mandate that that the ANC wants to go forward, sacrifice is needed. Everybody must be ready to pay a level of sacrifice. Let go and move to the next point. There are things you will have to drop if you want to go forward. And Luthuli was always ready to let go and move to the higher point. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Rollins. And I wish to disclose to comrades that we were very fortunate as a branch in that as we were planning this program, we discovered that the University of South Africa was itself honoring the legend, the giant, the President General, INkosi Luthuli. And we made an attempt as a branch to attend so that we can learn about our leader from a different vantage point. And I liked that the prof spoke about the many facets of the President General, which is quite consistent with a lot of the leaders of the ANC. We like to joke that they've had several lifetimes in one. Now, comrades, it is my great pleasure to now introduce our main guest speaker. Comrades, it is now my singular honor and privilege to invite our keynote speaker, Comrade Jeff Kateb. Our guest this evening is a leader whose life has been dedicated to the service of the African National Congress and to the people of South Africa. He has served our movement with distinction as a member of the National Executive Committee and has held several cabinet portfolios in the democratic government, making a significant contribution to the transformation of our country. One of the very strange records that Comrade Jeff has is that I believe it's still your record, the longest serving cabinet minister. Hey. So he stands alone there. We are not sure how long he will have that record, but make no mistake, young people are coming after you. Yeah. This evening, comrades, he joins us at a particularly important moment in our history. Following the 2025 inquest, which established the truth surrounding the death of INkosi Albert Luthuli, we now finally have an opportunity to reflect not only on the life and the legacy of one of the ANC's greatest leaders, but also on the enduring values of truth, justice, principled leadership, and disciplined service that he embodied. And as Prof. Rowlands would have indicated, ultimately led the apartheid government to resort to what they used to call in Germany the final solution. Comrades, it is therefore fitting that the inaugural INkosi Albert Luthuli commemorative lecture be delivered by a leader of such stature and long-standing commitment to our movement. Please rise where appropriate and join me in giving a warm and revolutionary welcome to our keynote speaker, Comrade Jeff Kateb.
Amanda. Program Director, Leadership of the ANC, and all protocol observed. Allow me at the very onset to express my profound gratitude to the leadership and membership of the Chief Albert Luthuli branch for extending to me this singular honor of delivering this inaugural memorial lecture dedicated to one of the greatest sons of Africa, Chief Albert John Mvumbi. It is an honor made even more profound by the significance of the moment in which we gather. I also want to welcome our candidate for the 4th of November election in this branch 32, wishing you and the ANC all of the best.
Thank you very much.
We meet at a defining constitutional moment in the life of our republic. For nearly 6 decades, South Africa officially recorded that Chief Albert Luthuli, the 8th president of our movement, the ANC, Africa's first Nobel Peace Laureate, and one of the foremost architects of our liberation struggle, died after being accidentally struck by a goods train. That official version became part of our public record. His death entered our history books while it simultaneously shaped our national memory. The history was narrated and taught to generations of our country and beyond. This tragedy of the narrative is that it became accepted as a true historic record. Yet history has an extraordinary quality. It possesses an enduring capacity to demand the truth. And the truth, however, delayed, possesses an even greater capacity to expose falsehood. In 2025, after 58 years after the tragic afternoon in Gradville, our democratic courts of South Africa finally overturned one of apartheid's most enduring official lies. The KwaZulu-Natal High Court in Pietermaritzburg restored the historic truth by rejecting a manufactured narrative of over 5 decades as it declared that the previous finding could no longer stand. In doing so, the High Court affirmed that President Luthuli did not die in the manner that apartheid had claimed. The judgment represents far more than correction of a historic record. It represents the triumph of constitutional democracy over authoritarianism. It represents the triumph of evidence over propaganda. It represents the triumph of truth over state-sponsored deception. And above all, it reminds us that justice delayed need not become justice denied. That lesson lies at the heart of today's lecture. Because today's lecture is about the meaning of his life. It is not merely about correcting the circumstances of his assassination, nor is it about restoring the moral architecture of South Africa's liberation history. It is not only about exposing apartheid's lie, it is about reaffirming the democratic promise for which Chief Luthuli lived, struggled, and ultimately laid down his own life. Comrades, every nation possesses towering figures who transcended their own generation. Such leaders cease to belong to their political organizations alone. They become part of the moral inheritance of humanity itself. Abraham Lincoln belongs not only to America. Mahatma Gandhi belongs not only to India. Martin Luther King Jr. belongs not only to the United States. Nelson Mandela, our icon, belongs not only to South Africa. So, as Chief Luthuli belongs not only to the ANC, he belongs to humanity. His greatness did not arise because he occupied high office. His greatness arose because he understood that political leadership derives neither from title nor position. It derives from moral authority. History remembers many rulers. It remembers far fewer leaders. Power commands obedience. Moral authority commands conscience. Chief Luthuli possessed both. As a traditional leader, he understood the authority of custom. As president of our movement, he understood the authority of democratic legitimacy. As a Christian, he understood the authority of faith. As a Nobel Peace Laureate, he understood the authority of humanity. And as a freedom fighter, he understood that genuine peace cannot exist where injustice reigns. His life, therefore, embodies one of the greatest paradoxes in political history. He became internationally celebrated as a man of peace, precisely because he refused to make peace with injustice. He understood what generations before and after him will also discover. Chief amongst others was that peace without justice is merely organized oppression. Justice without truth is impossible. And freedom without courage can never endure. It is therefore fitting that as we gather this evening under the banner of his name, we ask ourselves a question that extends far beyond biography. What exactly did Chief Luthuli bequeath to democratic South Africa? Was it merely organizational leadership? Was it simple political strategy? Was it only international recognition? Or did he leave us something infinitely greater? I submit to you that Chief Luthuli bequeathed to our country three enduring legacies. Firstly, the moral legacy of our struggle. Second, the political courage to transform the ANC from an organization of petitions into a mass movement of defiance. Thirdly, an unwavering belief that truth ultimately outlives tyranny. These three principles continue to define the constitutional soul of our republic. Without them, our democracy loses its moral compass. Without them, reconciliation becomes. Without them, justice becomes selective. Without them, freedom itself becomes fragile. It is these principles that I wish to explore with you this evening. This I do not just do it to honor, but to understand why his life remains so indispensable to the future of our country. For history, it is never simple about yesterday. History is always a conversation with tomorrow. And if we fail to understand this, Chief Albert Luthuli correctly, we risk misunderstanding the very foundations upon which our constitutional democracy now stands. Today, therefore, we gather not merely to remember, we gather to restore. We gather to restore truth, restore history, to restore justice, and above all, to restore democratic promise for which Luthuli gave his life. Every generation, comrades, inherits leaders, but only a few generations are privileged to witness the emergence of giants. Chief Luthuli was one such giant. He is remembered amongst great leaders when they died. Far less attention is given to where they were from. To understand Chief Luthuli's extraordinary contribution to South Africa, we must first understand the making of the man. He was born in 1898 in Bulawayo, then part of Southern Rhodesia, the present-day Zimbabwe. Yet history reminds us that geography alone does not determine patriotism. Nations are built not merely by birthplace, but by commitment. Chief Luthuli became, in every sense of the word, a South African patriot. He chose South Africa. He chose her people. He chose her suffering, and ultimately, he chose her freedom over his own safety. It is perhaps one of history's beautiful ironies that a man born outside our present borders would become one of the greatest architects of modern South Africa. For true patriotism has never been measured by where one is from. It is measured by what one is prepared to sacrifice. After completing his education and obtaining his teaching diploma, the young Albert Luthuli joined the distinguished staff of Adams College. Adams College represented one of the foremost intellectual centers of African thought in Southern Africa. Its classrooms nurtured some of the finest minds ever produced of this continent. Among those who shaped its intellectual culture was Professor Z.K. Matthews, one of Africa's greatest constitutional thinkers, and later one of the principal architects of the Freedom Charter. It was here that Luthuli developed as an educator in the deepest sense of the word. For education, as he understood it, was never merely the transfer of knowledge. It was the cultivation of human dignity. It was the preparation of free men and women. It was the awakening of conscience. Long before he became president of the ANC, he understood that liberation begins in the mind before it manifests itself in political institutions. That insight would define in the mind before it manifests itself in political institutions. Unlike hereditary monarchs, whose authority derives from birth, Albert Luthuli was called by his own people to become a chief of the Umvoti Mission Reserve at Gradville. This distinction is profoundly very important because his authority rested not merely upon lineage, it rested upon legitimacy. His people chose him because they trusted him. Leadership was therefore not inherited, it was earned. That principle would later become one of the defining characteristics of democratic South Africa itself. Legitimacy derives not from force, it derives from consent and confidence of the people. The greatest leaders do not govern over people, they govern with people. It is for this reason that I regarded Albert Luthuli not merely as a traditional leader. He became something infinitely different and much greater. He became a people's chief. His authority flowed simultaneously from African custom, from democratic legitimacy, and from moral conviction. These three pillars would later define his remarkable political leadership. Friends, when the ANC was founded in 1912, it emerged under extraordinary difficult historic circumstances. The Union of South Africa had been established in 1912. Black South Africans had been excluded from meaningful political participation. Land dispossession had accelerated. Institutional racism was steadily becoming entrenched. The founders of the ANC believed, understandably so, that reason, persuasion, and constitutional petitioning might still influence those who governed. Their methods reflected the political realities of their time. Delegates traveled to London. Petitions were drafted. Respectful representations were made. The hope remained that justice might yet persuade power. History would prove otherwise. Petitions were ignored. Representations were dismissed. Respect was met with repression. Dialogue was answered by discrimination. Appeals for justice was met with legislation determined and designed to deny justice itself. This strategy was not that founders lacked courage. The tragedy was that they confronted a system fundamentally incapable of recognizing African humanity. The ANC, therefore, faced an unavoidable historical question. Could freedom be achieved merely by asking politely for it? Or would history require a different form of struggle? That question would fundamentally reshape our liberation movement. In 1944, a remarkable generation of young intellectuals and revolutionaries established the ANC Youth League, led by Anton Lembede, including Walter Sisulu, Nelson Mandela, Oliver Tambo, A.P. Mda, and many other youth leaguers who challenged not the legitimacy of the ANC, but their methods. They respected their leaders, but they believed history demanded greater agency. They recognized the apartheid of what was rapidly becoming apartheid could never be dismantled by petitions alone. The program of action adopted in 1949 fundamentally altered the direction of our movement. Mass mobilization, civil disobedience, national campaigns, boycotts, strikes, defiance were the order of the day. The politics of passive appeal would give way to the politics of organized resistance. History often tells us that generations replace one another, but the genius of the ANC lay in something more profound. The Youth League did not destroy the older generation, as they persuaded them, and nowhere was this more evident than the emergence of Chief Albert Luthuli. The Youth League understood that every revolution requires moral legitimacy. It requires leadership capable not only of inspiring anger, but of commanding trust. In KwaZulu-Natal, that leader became Albert Luthuli. He was elected president of the Natal ANC, replacing AWG champion. And a few years later, the ANC's annual conference in 1952, delegates overwhelmingly elected him president of the ANC. That election, comrades, represented the democratic endorsement of a new strategic direction. It marked that moment when the ANC consciously transformed itself from an organization primarily characterized by constitutional representations into a mass liberation movement prepared to confront injustice through organized national resistance. It is impossible to understand modern South Africa without understanding that particular moment. For it was Chief Luthuli's leadership that the ANC ceased asking of history's permission. It began making history. His election, therefore, represented far more than personal achievement. It represented the fusion of moral authority with revolutionary purpose. The dignity of African national traditional leadership found common cause with the radical energy of a new generation. That wisdom of experience embraced the impatience of the youth. The result was transformation. History will never be the same again. From that moment onward, the ANC will no longer simply be petitioning the powerful. It would organize the powerless. It would no longer merely appeal to justice. It would mobilize the people themselves to demand justice. That transformation did not happen accidentally. It happened precisely because Chief Luthuli possessed that rare quality found in strong political leadership. He understood that genuine leadership is not measured by preserving the yesterday. It is measured by preparing a nation of tomorrow. It is precisely because of that courage that Luthuli became far more than the 8th president of the ANC. He became the architect of the present and modern ANC. He became the moral judge and bridge between the ANC of petitions and the ANC of mass democratic resistance. And in doing so, he changed not only his organization, the ANC, he changed the destiny of South Africa. History occasionally reaches moments that redefine the destiny of nations. These moments seldom announce themselves. They arrive quietly, disguised as ordinary political decisions. Yet, in retrospect, they become the turning points upon which itself pivots. The election of Chief Luthuli as the ANC president was one such particular moment. It is far more than the election of a new president. It marked the rebirth of the ANC. Let's appreciate this magnitude of the transformation by honestly confronting the conditions of the ANC Luthuli's presidency found itself. For 4 decades after 1912, the ANC remained principally an organization of constitutional persuasion. Its leaders traveled to London. They petitioned the British Crown. They submitted memoranda after memoranda. They sought meetings. They pleaded for justice within an unjust political order. No one should mistake these efforts as mistakes, as weaknesses. They reflected the historic realities confronting a colonized people whose political space was systematically shrinking. Yet by the late 1940s, one painful truth had become impossible to ignore. The apartheid state was simply not listening. Every petition was not answered, but answered by another oppressive statehood. Every respectful representation was met with deeper exclusion. Every appeal for conscience encountered a system that surrendered its conscience. The very institution entrusted with justice had themselves become instruments of injustice. History, therefore, posed a profound question before the ANC. Can injustice be persuaded to surrender its own privilege, or must organized people compel history to move? That question found its answer under Chief Albert Luthuli. Friends, one of the greatest misconceptions deliberately cultivated by certain historians is the portrayal of Chief Albert Luthuli as a cautious gradualist who stood apart from the radical transformation of the liberation movement. Nothing could be further from the historic record. Indeed, the opposite is true. It was under Chief Luthuli's presidency that the ANC we know today became, for the first time in its history, a genuine mass democratic movement. The program of action adopted by the Youth League in 1949 did not become living political practice until it found a president prepared to implement it. That president was Chief Albert Luthuli. He understood that freedom cannot be negotiated by the oppressed while the oppressor monopolizes political power. Freedom had first to be organized. It had to be mobilized. It had to become a living expression of the people themselves. And so, under his strong leadership, the ANC embarked upon one of the greatest campaigns of peaceful mass resistance ever witnessed on the African continent. That was the Defiance Campaign of 1952, which represented nothing less than a revolution in political strategy. For the first time, ordinary women and men deliberately and openly violated unjust apartheid laws. Africans entered railway stations reserved for whites. Pass laws were openly defied. Curfews were ignored. Public facilities reserved under racial segregation were deliberately occupied. Thousands willingly submitted themselves to be arrested and to go to jail. They understood that imprisonment in the service of justice was infinitely more honorable than freedom purchased through submission. Luthuli explained the significance of this historic change with remarkable clarity. He declared, and I quote, "The program of action stressed new methods. Representations were done away with. Demonstrations on a countrywide scale, strike action, and civil disobedience were to replace words," close quotes. These are not the words of a political moderate, reluctant to challenge apartheid. Those are the words of a revolutionary strategist, as they revealed a strong leader who understood that history advances not merely through speeches, but through organized action. It was this leadership that the ANC ceased asking permission to exist. It became the organized expression of the people's will. There's another dimension I want to explore as well that deserves recognition. Apartheid sought to divide South Africans by race. Chief Luthuli sought to unite them through justice. That distinction changed the course of our history. He recognized something that many liberation movements across the world would only discover much later. Oppression may be racial in its architecture, but freedom must be universal in its appeal. It was therefore under Chief Luthuli's leadership that one of the most extraordinary political alliances in modern history emerged. Africans, Indians, colored people, progressive whites, workers, religious communities, professionals, students, women, traditional leaders, trade unionists, communists, liberals, Christians, Muslims, people from all races, every class, every language, every creed found common cause in a single democratic movement. The Congress Alliance was born. The South African Indian Congress, the South African Colored People's Congress, the Congress of Democrats, the South African Congress of Trade Unions, all working together under the moral leadership of Chief Luthuli. That achievement can never be overestimated. For centuries, political power had been organized through exclusion. Chief Luthuli reorganized resistance through inclusion. He demonstrated that non-racialism was not a constitutional invention of 1994. It was a practice of the liberation movement decades before our democracy. Every nation eventually reaches a defining moment. For South Africa, that moment came not in parliament, not in government, not in courts. It came among the people themselves. Chief Luthuli and the Congress Alliance asked perhaps the most revolutionary democratic question of our time when they asked, what kind of South Africa do the people themselves wish to build? You would notice carefully what was revolutionary about that question. It was not politicians, not lawyers, not judges, not academics, not governments. It was the masses of the people themselves. Volunteers traveled throughout our land. They walked through villages, factories, mines, churches, townships, schools, hostels, farms, everywhere South Africans lived. They carried neither legislation nor manifesto. They carried notebooks. They listened. They recorded. They learned. They asked the people a profoundly democratic question. What should freedom mean? Never before in our history had constitutional ideas emerged from the people themselves. This was democracy before democracy. This was constitution making before constitutionalism. This was participation before parliament. Constitution making before that. That's why thousands of our people, they converged at Kliptown on the 25th and 26th of June 1955. There, the Congress of the People adopted what remains one of the greatest democratic ever produced on African soil, the Freedom Charter. That Freedom Charter did not belong to the ANC. It belonged to the people. It was not imposed upon South Africans. It emerged from South Africans. Therefore, its opening declaration still echoes true across history and even today when it says, South Africa belongs to all who live in it, black and white. Those simple words represented perhaps the most radical political statement ever made in apartheid South Africa, because they rejected both racial domination and racial revenge. They proclaimed instead a democratic republic founded upon equality, dignity, and justice for all. Today, many principles contained in our Constitution derive directly from that extraordinary democratic exercise: human dignity, equality, non-racialism, non-sexism, democratic participation, socio-economic justice, constitutional supremacy. The seeds of our democratic order were planted long before 1994. Albert Luthuli helped plant them. Ladies and gentlemen, history teaches us an immutable lesson. Whenever tyranny confronts organized truth, tyranny invariably responds with repression. So it was with apartheid. The greater the success of the Defiance campaign, the harsher the banning orders. The stronger the Congress alliance, the wider the arrest. The more united the people became, the more frightened the apartheid state became, because oppression possesses one permanent weakness. It fears oppressed people more than organized crimes, armies. Nowhere was that fear more evident than in the treatment of Chief Albert Luthuli. When the apartheid state demanded that he chose between serving his people as a chief and serving them through the ANC, he refused to separate his traditional duty from his democratic responsibility. He understood no contradiction between them. For him, leadership meant service, whether exercised under African custom or far more democratic struggle. The apartheid regime removed him as a chief, but history did far more remarkable. It elevated him beyond traditional authority. The regime intended to strip him of leadership. Instead, it transformed him into a people's chief. The chief without a throne, the leader without official office, the statesman whose authority no government could either confer or withdraw. For moral authority cannot be legislated. It can only be earned, and Chief Luthuli earned it for all eternity. History has taught humanity one enduring lesson. Whenever a people begin to organize effectively against oppression, the oppressor invariably attempts to criminalize the struggle itself. The language changes, the methods evolve, but the objective remains constant. Those demanding justice are recast as enemies of the state. Those defending human dignity are labeled agitators. Those seeking democracy are brain-dead revolutionaries, and those who refuse to surrender become criminals in the eyes of an unjust legal order. South Africa was no exception. As the Defiance campaign spread across our country, as the Congress Alliance united South Africans across race, color, and creed, as the Freedom Charter gave voice to the aspirations of millions, the apartheid state realized and reached a devastating conclusion. It could no longer defeat the ideas of a liberation movement. It therefore resolved to destroy its leaders. The apartheid regime, as we know, possessed parliament. It controlled the executive. It commanded the police. It directed the armed forces. It demanded and dominated the courts. It wrote the laws. It administered the prisons. It controlled the media. Yet, despite commanding every institution of state power, it feared one organization above all else, the ANC. Why? Because government derived power from institutions. Liberation movements derived power from legitimacy, and legitimacy cannot be outlawed. Liberations movement derived power from legitimacy. The apartheid state understood this also. That is why, during the early hours of 5 December 1956, 156 of our leaders, including Luthuli, were arrested and charged with high treason. They wanted to decapitate leadership, criminalize dissent, destroy our movement, silence history. For merely 5 years, all the accused stood to Africans, Indians, colored South Africans, progressive whites, workers, professionals, trade unions, communists, Christians, Muslims, traditional leaders. They entered the courtroom as accused persons. They emerged afterwards as symbols of democracy. The courtroom became something its architects had never intended. It became a university of freedom. The accused educated one another. They debated strategy. They strengthened relationships. They deepened political understanding. There exist, comrades, profound constitutional lesson that was hidden in the treason trial. Apartheid believed legality was synonymous with legitimacy. It believed that because Parliament enacted racist laws, those laws were therefore morally binding. But Chief Luthuli rejected the proposition completely. He understood and justice are not always the same. History is full of legal injustice. Slavery was legal. Colonial conquest was legal. Land dispossession was legal. Past laws were legal. The Suppression of Communism Act was legal. Yet every law violated justice. Every one of those laws violated human dignity. Even one violated the fundamental equality of humanity itself. It was Chief Luthuli who confronted one of the greatest moral questions any leader can face. When the law itself becomes unjust, what then becomes the duty of its citizen? His answer was both courageous and timeless. He chose justice over legal conformity, not because he rejected law, but because he rejected injustice masquerading as law. This distinction would later become one of the philosophical foundation of South Africa's constitutional democracy. Today we live under a constitutional apartheid lived under parliamentary supremacy. These two concepts are fundamentally different. Under parliamentary supremacy, Parliament could make any law it wished, no matter how unjust, no matter how irrational, no matter how oppressive. The courts were largely powerless to question Parliament itself. The law became whatever Parliament declared it to be. The consequence was devastating. Apartheid became perfectly legal, but profoundly illegitimate. Our constitutional democracy rejected that model forever. Today, our Parliament itself is subject to the Constitution. Our government is subject to the Constitution. The President is subject to the Constitution. The judiciary is subject to the Constitution. Every public institution derives its authority not from political power, but from constitutional democracy. That is the democratic promise for which Chief Albert Luthuli struggled. Comrades, as the treason trial slowly unfolded, as acquittals eventually followed, as the Congress alliance emerged politically stronger, the apartheid regime reached another dangerous conclusion. If the courts could not permanently silence the liberation movement, then extraordinary measures would have to follow. The years that followed became increasingly violent. The forced removals of Sofiata, the brutality of Mkumbane, Cato men, the potato boycotts, Alexander bus boycotts of Wali Ngit, mass arrest of women protesting the past laws, the Bondo revolt, each demonstrated one unmistakable truth. The people that lost their fear, an authoritarian state, fears nothing more than a fearless people. That confrontation reached its most tragic expression on the 21st of March 1960. At Sharpeville, 69 unarmed South Africans were brutally killed. Hundreds more were wounded. The blood of Sharpeville forever destroyed any illusion that apartheid could reform itself peacefully. The massacre marked not merely a national tragedy, it represented the collapse of constitutional possibility under apartheid. The state had now answered peaceful protest with bullets, dialogue with detention, petitions with prohibition, mass mobilization with massacre. Shortly thereafter came the declaration of the state of emergency. Thousands were detained, polka organizations were outlawed, the ANC, the PAC were banned. Members of itself became a criminal offense. Friends, let's pause for a moment and reflect upon what had now occurred. The people had petitions, they had been ignored. They had negotiated, they had been dismissed. They had demonstrated peacefully, they had been arrested. They had gone to court, they had been prosecuted. They had protested, they had been massacred. They had been deliberately closed. The question confronted Chief Luthuli and his colleagues was essentially existential. Can a people be expected to obey a legal order that has abolished every lawful means through which that order may be changed? History would shortly provide its most prominent answer that will fundamentally alter the course of South Africa's liberation struggle. There comes a moment in the life of every nation that represents no good, only necessary ones. South Africa reached that point in 1961. For almost 50 years, the ANC had exhausted every peaceful constitutional avenue available to an oppressed people. It petitioned, it negotiated, it demonstrated peacefully, it organized, it contested unjust laws through disciplined civil disobedience. It accepted imprisonment, it accepted bannings, it accepted persecutions, it accepted sacrifice. The response of apartheid was never dialogue. It was repression and more repression and brutality. When peaceful protest was met with imprisonment, the movement persisted. When petitions were ignored, the movement persisted. When organizations were banned, the movement persisted. When peaceful demonstrators were massacred in Sharpeville, the movement persisted. But one question now confronted the leadership of led by Chief Luthuli. What is the duty of the liberation movement when every peaceful avenue has been deliberately closed by the state itself? This was an ethical question. This was a constitutional question. It was a profound question. History only judges decisions. It seldom appreciates the circumstances that made those decisions unavoidable. Comrades, one of the greatest injustices committed against Chief Luthuli has been the persistent attempt to portray him as somehow in a detached form or opposed to the decision to establish the military wing Umkhonto weSizwe. This portrayal is historically inaccurate. It is intellectually dishonest, and following the restoration of historical truth regarding his death, it is incumbent upon us to restore the historic truth regarding his leadership. Chief Luthuli never celebrated violence. Neither did Nelson Mandela, or Oliver Tambo, or Walter Sisulu, Moses Kotane, Yusuf Dad, or Joe Slovo. Violence was never a philosophy of the ANC. Justice was. The ANC did not abandon peaceful struggle because it had failed morally. It did so because the apartheid state had abolished every peaceful mechanism through which injustice could be challenged. The responsibility for that tragic turning point lies first and foremost with the apartheid regime itself. History records that following the banning of the ANC, extensive consultations took place among the leadership. Those discussions were neither impulsive nor reckless. They were sober, they were measured, they were painful. Every possible was considered. Chief Albert Luthuli was not absent. He was at the center of them all. The decision that eventually emerged was not the abandonment of political struggle. It was the expansion of it. The movement recognized that the people required both a shield and a spear. The shield remained the ANC. The spear became Umkhonto weSizwe, the spear of the nation. Even the name itself reveals this philosophy. A spear is not an instrument of conquest. It is an instrument of defense. It exists to protect a people whose existence is under threat. The first operations undertaken by Umkhonto weSizwe were acts of sabotage directed against infrastructure, not against civilians. This distinction is morally and historically significant. The objective was not revenge, it was political communication. It was intended to demonstrate that the oppressed will no longer submit passively to permanent domination. The movement understood that every effort had been made to avoid loss of life. This is a historic fact, too often omitted by those seeking to simplify our liberation history. Our liberation movement did not embrace indiscriminate violence. It embraced discipline, resistance under extraordinary circumstances. Comrades, perhaps no single episode better exposes the false narrative surrounding Chief Luthuli than Nelson Mandela's own conduct. Having been appointed Commander-in-Chief of Umkhonto weSizwe, Mandela traveled outside South Africa for military and political consultation. Upon his return, he briefed the High Command that was based in Rivonia, not far from here. But before resuming his underground work, he undertook another journey. He traveled to Groundville to brief President Luthuli, the president of the ANC. History should pause at that moment. If Chief Luthuli had truly opposed the establishment of Umkhonto weSizwe, why would its commander report directly to him? Why did the commander-in-chief seek his guidance? Why did Mandela secure the understanding of President Luthuli? The answer is self-evident, because organizational discipline remained intact, because the ANC remained the president remained the moral and political leader of the ANC, because history was unfolding collectively, not through isolated individuals. Mandela left Groundville after briefing Chief Luthuli, the president. On his return journey, he was arrested near Howick. But history often remembers only the arrest. It forgets the meeting that preceded it. The Rivonia trial provides also perhaps the clearest evidence of Chief Luthuli's position. When Nelson Mandela and his comrades stood before the court facing death penalty, Chief Luthuli, as the president of the ANC, did not distance himself. He did not condemn them. He did not disown them. Instead, he stood with them. He defended them. He testified in open court in support of their cause. His words remain among the most courageous ever spoken by an ANC president. He declared, and I quote, in open court in Rivonia, "No one can blame brave, just men for seeking justice by the use of violent methods. Nor could they be blamed if they tried to create an organized force to establish peace and they represent the highest in morality and ethics in the South African political struggle," close quote. Those are not words of a reluctant observer. They are the words of a leader who understood the terrible burden history had imposed upon his generation. They reveal not enthusiasm for violence. They reveal responsibility. They reveal moral anguish. They reveal leadership. Comrades, history offers one of evidence that cannot be ignored. When President Tambo, as the deputy president then, assumed responsibility for building the ANC's international military capability, the first detachment of Umkhonto weSizwe was given a remarkable name, called the Luthuli Detachment. Names matter. Movements choose symbols carefully. Would the ANC have named its first military formation after a leader who was fundamentally opposed to its very existence? The naming of the Luthuli Detachment was not ceremonial. It was historic recognition. It was acknowledging the central place occupied by Chief Luthuli in one of the most consequential decisions ever taken by our liberation movement. That detachment, the Luthuli Detachment, would later participate along the Zimbabwe African People's Union in the Wanki and Sipolilo campaigns in 1967. Therefore, the legacy of Chief Luthuli extended far beyond South Africa's borders into the wider struggle for the liberation of Southern Africa. His vision was never confined by geography. It was animated by justice. There's a profound lesson, comrades, for our democracy. History is seldom served by caricature. Great leaders are rarely extremists, neither are they cowards. Chief Luthuli occupied this difficult moral space where conviction and restraint coexist. He believed in peace, but also understood that peace without justice is submission. He believed in reconciliation, but he understood that reconciliation without truth is illusion. He believed in humanity, but he also understood that no people can be expected to surrender their humanity indefinitely in the face of organized oppression. This is why history must finally retire the false image of Albert Luthuli as a passive spectator to the most decisive strategic shift in the liberation struggle. He was neither absent, nor hesitant, nor irrelevant. He was where history put him, at the moral center of our movement, confronted with impossible choices. And once again, he chose courage. Every dictatorship eventually discovers that violence alone cannot sustain oppression. Force can imprison people. It cannot imprison history. Bullets can silence witnesses, but they can never silence truth. That is why authoritarian systems seldom rely upon violence alone. They construct lies. They manufacture official narratives. They manipulate evidence. They falsify records. They convert institutions of justice into instruments of injustice. Ultimately, they seek not merely to control society, they seek to control memory itself. Apartheid understood this better than most. Not simply a political system. It was a system of organized falsehood. It legislated racial superiority. It criminalized criminality and equality. It called oppression order. It called dispossession development. It called racial domination separate development. It called injustice law. And when necessary, it even sought to determine how history itself would remember its victims. Comrades, Chief Luthuli did not merely become a victim of apartheid. He became victim of apartheid's determination to control historic truth. For almost 6 decades, South Africa was told that President of the ANC died after being struck by a goods train. That explanation entered official records. It appeared in textbooks. It found its way into public consciousness. It became a version of history. But there's a profound difference between official version and the truth. Governments may write reports. Courts may issue judgments. Officials may sign certificates, yet none of these possesses the power to transform falsehood into truth. Truth possesses an independence that no state can permanently extinguish. It may be delayed, but and it may be suppressed. It may be buried beneath the bureaucracy and propaganda, but it possesses a remarkable capacity to return. Therefore, the reopening of the inquest into the death of Chief Luthuli was therefore never simply correcting one historic record. It represented something infinitely great. It represented the moral obligation of a democratic republic to confront its own history honestly. No democracy worthy of its name can ask its citizens to embrace reconciliation, while simultaneously asking them to live with manufactured history. Truth is not the enemy of reconciliation. Truth is its foundation. Without truth, justice becomes selective. Without truth, memory becomes manipulated. Without truth, reconciliation becomes performative rather than genuine. Our democratic state, therefore, had both a constitutional and moral obligation to revisit this chapter of our history, not to reopen old wounds, but to ensure that those wounds, falsely explained, could finally begin to heal. When the High Court in Pietermaritzburg, I was there, revisited the circumstances surrounding Chief Luthuli's death, it reminded every South African that constitutional democracy possesses a unique strength absent from authoritarian regimes. It allows the republic to correct itself. Authoritarian governments fear independent courts because independent courts answer neither to ideology nor political convenience. They answer only to evidence. They answer only to the Constitution. They answer only to the law. This is the genius of our constitutional order. Unlike apartheid, democratic South Africa accepts no institution, including the state itself, is beyond scrutiny. The Constitution does not protect governments from accountability. It protects accountability from governments. That distinction defines the moral architecture of our republic. Comrades, ladies and gentlemen, the significance of the Luthuli judgment therefore extends beyond one individual. It affirms a constitutional principle of enduring importance. No justice, nor injustice acquires legitimacy merely because time has passed on. No falsehood becomes truth merely because generations have repeated it. No abuse of power escapes moral authority and scrutiny simply because those responsible believe themselves beyond accountability. This is one of the greatest achievements of our constitutional democracy. It possesses the humility to revisit history. It possesses the courage to submit institutional failure. It possesses the confidence to allow independent courts to overturn even the official narratives inherited from the past. That is not weakness. That is constitutional maturity. There are some who ask why we continue revisiting apartheid crimes decades after the advent of our democracy. The answer is both simple and profound, precisely because democracy is not merely the mistake or the transfer of political power. Democracy is the restoration of truth. Freedom is incomplete if history itself remains imprisoned. Justice is incomplete if victims are remembered only through language chosen by their oppressors. National reconciliation cannot be sustained upon convenient truths and myths. It must rest upon honest memory. The Luthuli judgment, therefore, belongs not only to the Luthuli family, it belongs not only to the ANC, it belongs to every South African who believes that constitutional democracy must always possess the courage to confront uncomfortable truths. The judgment also reminds us of another constitutional lesson. The struggle against apartheid was never simply a struggle to replace one government with another. It was a struggle to replace arbitrary power with constitutional power. Under apartheid, parliament was supreme. Today, the constitution is supreme. Under apartheid, the courts largely enforced unjust statutes. Today, the courts possess the constitutional authority to invalidate unlawful exercises of public power. Under apartheid, the state manufactured official truth. Today, the judiciary possesses its independence to test every official narrative against evidence, against the law. That transformation represents one of the greatest achievements of democratic South Africa. It is a constitutional inheritance purchased through enormous sacrifice. We therefore dishonor Chief Luthuli if we reduce this judgment merely to a correction of a historic fact. It is far more than that. It is a reaffirmation of the values for which he lived: truth, justice, human dignity, accountability, the rule of law, and constitutional supremacy, not the rule by law. These were the abstract constitutional ideals of Chief Luthuli. They were principles for which he sacrificed his office, his freedom, his security, and ultimately his life. The Republic today has now honored that sacrifice by ensuring that history no longer speaks with the voice of apartheid. It speaks with the authority of evidence. Perhaps the greatest tribute we can pay Chief Luthuli is not merely to celebrate this judgment. It is to understand what is required of us. Truth can not become selective. Justice cannot be seasonal. Accountability cannot become politically convenient. If constitutional democracy is to retain its moral authority, then every generation must possess that courage to submit itself to exactly the same constitutional standard that it demands of previous generations. That is the true democratic promise. It is not vengeance. It is not historic revenge. It is constitutional fidelity. It is belief that no lie, however powerful, should outlive the truth. It is the belief that no office is above the Constitution. It is the belief that no citizen is beneath its protection. And it is the belief that history itself must always remain accountable to truth. That, comrades, is the enduring legacy of the Luthuli verdict. It did not merely correct the past, it strengthened the future of our constitutional democracy. History serves little purpose if it merely informs us of where we have been. Its greater purpose is to illuminate where we ought to go. That is why today's lecture cannot end with only the Luthuli judgment. Important that judgment is. It answers only one question. It tells us how Chief Luthuli died. It cannot answer the far more important question: how should we live if we are to remain faithful to what he died for. Our liberation struggle was never fought merely to change governments, as I've said. It was fought to change the moral foundations upon which South African society is built. The struggle sought not simple political freedom, it sought human dignity, it sought justice, it sought equality, it sought opportunity, it sought the restoration of our common humanity. It sought to establish a republic governed not by race, not by privilege, not by fear, but by constitutional principle. The constitution of this great republic is therefore not an accident of history. It is the legal expression of the moral vision for which generations of South Africans sacrificed everything. When we read the Bill of Rights today, we are not merely reading legal provisions, we are reading the political dreams of Chief Luthuli. The right to dignity, the right to equality, access to education, access to healthcare, access to housing. These rights did not emerge in 1996. They were born in struggle. They were articulated in the Freedom Charter. They were defended in the treason trial. They were strengthened in prison cells. They were paid for in exile, and they were purchased through blood. Chief Luthuli understood something that remains profoundly relevant today. Democracy is not self-executing. It requires citizens. It requires institutions. It requires vigilance. And above all, it requires ethical leadership. It requires institutions. It requires vigilance. It requires ethical leadership. No constitution, however beautifully written, such as ours, can submit and substitute for integrity. No code, however independent, can replace moral courage. No law, however progressive, can compel ethical conduct. Ultimately, democracy needs or fails according to the quality of those entrusted with its stewardship. That is perhaps Chief Luthuli's greatest lessons for our generation. He understood that political office is not an entitlement. It is a public trust. Leadership is not measured by authority over others. It is measured by responsibility towards others. Public office exists not to elevate the individual. It exists to serve the nation. Our democracy today faces challenges different from those confronting Chief Luthuli. We have defeated apartheid. It has been won. The Constitution has been adopted. Democratic institutions have been established. Yet, new responsibilities now confront us. Persistent inequality, poverty, economic exclusion. These are not merely policy failures. They are moral challenges because every rand stolen from public purse is a school not built. It's a clinic not equipped. It is a betrayal of the democratic process. It is the theft of hope. Chief Luthuli never understood freedom as an accumulation of privilege. He understood freedom as the expansion of possibility. He believed that leadership demanded sacrifice before reward, service before status. We must thank the Luthuli people for bequeathing us with this outstanding South African, a person who dedicated his entire life in the service of our people. These are the moments when nations become prisoners of selective memories. There is another lesson that Chief Luthuli leaves us, that leadership must never become louder than service. History has now restored Chief Albert Luthuli's truth. The responsibility for preserving that truth now passes to us. May history record that we prove worthy of receiving it. As I draw this inaugural memorial to its conclusion, let's remind ourselves, truth may be delayed, but truth may be suppressed, truth may be distorted, but truth can never be defeated. The generation of Chief Luthuli entrusted us with the Republic. Perhaps the greatest tribute we can pay to Chief Luthuli is not found in speeches, nor in monuments, nor in memorial lectures. It is found in conduct, in ethical leadership, in public service, in institutions that remained faithful to our Constitution. Chief Luthuli once reminded us that the road to freedom is via the cross. He understood that justice requires sacrifice, that freedom requires courage, that leadership requires service. His own life became the living testimony of those convictions. Today, nearly 6 decades after his passing, history has vindicated him. The lie has fallen, the truth has prevailed, justice has spoken. Now the responsibility passes to us. May we become worthy custodians of the democracy that Chief Luthuli helped to build. May we remain faithful to the Constitution that gives legal expression to the ideals for which he struggled. May we preserve the historic truth that has now been restored, and may we ensure that the democratic promise South Africa continues for generations yet unborn. Chief Luthuli reminds us that governments may command armies, parliaments may enact laws, states may attempt to manufacture history, but ultimately it is truth anchored in justice and protected by constitutional democracy that outlives every empire, every ideology, and every lie. Long live the spirit of Luthuli, long live.
Long live.
Ke a leboha.
Oh, thank you, comrades. And thank you to our guest speaker. I think the bar has been set very, very high for future guest speakers, and correctly so, we shall take the message forward. Comrades, we are going to take a short break. Refreshments are ready, and I will ask that we just hold on to our reflections, and then we just provide a consolidated one, because we have some comrades out there. It's getting a little bit chilly. And we will take just 2 10-minute sessions from Comrade Ukrish Naidu. He will provide sort of like a legal overview, and then immediately after that, Comrade Maringa, he will provide us with reflections from the perspective of veterans. Because when we speak of the Comrade President General, he really has been beyond us now for close to 6 decades. So for some of us, for myself, instance, I'm just 36 years old. I'm less than almost half the age in which he's since been laid to rest. And I think when we give our reflections, comrades, I would really like to push comrades who are here today. We must remember that Comrade Khateb is no longer an NSC member, so he can speak freely without worrying about being a murd. But just in terms of reflections, comrades, I think just a small takeaway for you, comrades, also during the break now to reflect on is that one thing that stands out is this idea and concept, and it's very interesting because it's very consistent across all ANC leaders that you have this expression of this idea of a man who can rise beyond his physical environment that he occupies. And in truly exceptional circumstances, some of these figures become global social figures, such as your likes of Comrade Nelson Mandela. But in truly, truly rare circumstances, these individuals and these figures can actually become bigger than the man himself. And they become ideas that live in the consciousness of all global citizens. And as we reflect, those who are carrying our phones, I would like us to try and Google and locate a poem that was written by a celebrated South African author, Ellen Patton, an anti-apartheid activist. He wrote a very beautiful poem about Comrade INkosi Luthuli. And also, comrades, just an announcement. We are joined by the Luthuli family. The grandson of INkosi Luthuli, Usandile, he's with us here tonight. He is joining us virtually. We've been having some technical difficulties, but we'll try and see if we can squeeze in a message of support. So please, comrades, let's just enjoy some refreshments. When we come back, we get these 2 reflections from the veterans. And then after that, we engage, and then we close. And then just a very critical highlight, comrades, we have another ceremony in the program where we will be lighting a candle for each year that the Luthuli family and the African National Congress, as well as the country at large, had to go without receiving this justice that was able to be dispensed in the inquest, which was concluded last year. So thank you, comrades. Please help yourself to some refreshments. Thank you.
You can just hold it. It's fine.
No
And
problem.
Thank you. Can you bring it?
Why don't you stand?
He's saying, why don't you stay then? Okay.
I'm looking at you. I'm looking at you.
Yeah. And I should also look at you. Yeah, we think we're going to look at each other. Yeah. I've got just a simple questions to be able to from your speech actually. I didn't draft anything outside. While you were talking, I took some highlights. Yeah. Because I'll be asking about for instance, when you spoke that is from Bulawayo, it's about the context of the immigration crisis here. When you speak of the fact that he believes in not authority over others but responsibility, the guidance you can give to the ANC councillor candidates because some have positions, those kind of things. So I just took them directly from the speech. And I think this will be the second question. And another interesting thing is about the multiracialism, so parliamentary supremacy versus constitutional supremacy. I saw you title it. I'm interested to know.
Nothing. 1, 2, 1, 2. Gonzalo. The translator, I okay. It's fine.
Good evening, Comrade Jeff Harebe.
Yes, how I comment?
I'm good. My name is Homozo Sepe. I'm from Ward 32. What a honor, it's actually more than an honor, a privilege to stand beside you. The man, when I was young, when I used to be part of Nelson Mandela's cabinet.
Yes.
Here am I with you. It's an honor. We have been giving us a very lecturing on the legacy of Chief Albert Luthuli. One of the few points that one learned from your lecturing was that you said a lot about the value system that Chief Albert Luthuli stood for. He stood for not authority over others, but to set responsibility over others. And in his leadership, he was more illuminating us where to go. And one of the things you touched on the recent judgment, you said, is far beyond just a correction of the history, but it's about where to go. How should we live, and we hold the values that Chief Albert Luthuli would be proud of us. Now, in the context of this year's local government election, how would you advise our councillor candidates or the nomination process within the ANC for our aspirant councillors to understand that it's not about the title, but it's about the service, so that they can accept when they lose through contestation, but and still rally behind those that have won?
Well, if one looks at the story of Chief Albert Luthuli, the 8th president of the ANC, it tells us that what is important in life is the service to the people, not entitlement. The history of Luthuli must inspire all ANC councillors to emulate his example. A man who could have reached any station in life, but he considered when the people of Gradville asked him to become their chief. He was not born into chieftainship, but because of service to the people, he obliged to serve the Amakolo tribe in Gradville. So as a leader of the ANC, he demonstrated that his sacrifice went beyond the call of Jude. From small beginnings in Bulawayo in Zimbabwe, he rose into the pinnacle of the ANC as the president. But also he attracted people across the color line, white people, colored people, Indians, all of them forging together to a common nation to ensure that the democracy that we take for granted today was built through sacrifice.
Beautiful, beautiful indeed. Now, talking about the fact that he was born in Bulawayo, in your lecture you also said geography alone doesn't determine patriotism. And even though he was born in Bulawayo, but he was one of the people that became the architects of our modern democracies. Now, in the context of the immigration crisis that is now unfolding in the country, where we saw the march and so forth, is this a reflection of what Chief Albert Luthuli stood for? And how can we advise the ANC to respond and address this kind of crisis that we have been seeing in the country by some movements that are somehow trying to take advantage of the democracy?
Well, first of all, I think we need to recognize that the borders that we see in Africa today, having 54 countries, those borders were not decided by Africans themselves. Colonial powers met in Berlin in 1884, and they partitioned Africa according to the powers that existed in Europe at that time. That's why you find British colonies, French colonies, Belgian colonies, as well as German. Our forefathers in 1963, when they founded the Organization of African Unity, decided that the ultimate vision in Africa is to have a united Africa. That's why today we have this vision of Agenda 2063, the Africa we want. Using the same example of Chief Luthuli, a man born in Zimbabwe, but he grew to be patriotic South Africans. What is paramount is that let's regard ourselves as Africans in Africa, but also take into consideration that we have 54 countries. Our government needs to strengthen immigration protocols to ensure that people who are in South Africa are legal and lawful in South Africa, properly documented. So that's why this issue of corruption that I talked about must also be fought by every South African, especially those officials in government who are responsible for guarding our borders. But that does not diminish the fact that at the end of the day, we need to embrace our African brothers and sisters as the example of Luthuli taught us. He was not the only one who became a true South African. You'll recall in history that there was a leader called Clemens Kadal who led one of the very important trade unions in South Africa called the ICU. A man who was born in Malawi, but he contributed immensely in the development of South Africa.
Talking about the men that led the trade unions, one of the important facts during the Chief Albert Luthuli's tenure was that he rallied, or rather founded, the multiracialism, right? Multiracial alliance, right? Where we saw the South African Indian Congress and the Colored Congress. He actually believed in inclusion, not exclusion, right? And I would assume that the birth of COSATU in 1985 would have resulted from such broader change. The ANC is believed to be a broader change.
Yes, most definitely.
Yeah. Now we're going through the local government. We then see the ANC leading the broader church, but one of its alliance partner now wanting to contest the election on its own as the SCCP. Your views on this conundrum in the context of the Chief Albert Luthuli as memory?
Well, the history teaches us that Luthuli was a man who was very broad-minded, whose Africanism was very progressive. He ensured that he united all races, classes, and all persuasions in South Africa into one common agenda, and that of creating a non-racial democracy. That's why in 1955 we had that Congress alliance that constituted of Africans, Indian, colored, democratic whites, and so on, that forged the Congress of the People to adopt the Freedom Charter. We need to emulate that example. It is a pity that that Congress alliance seems to be divided at this present moment in time, but I do hope that the SACP, as part of the alliance with the ANC, will find common cause in order to cooperate and work together, because at the end of the day, what is important is to improve the quality of life of South African people.
I think I've got the second last question. Just be with me. It's, like I said, it's an honor. I would go the whole night, but because of time, I've been restricted, right? I'm quoting from your lecture because we are very much listening, and because it provided us with a very great insight. I quote what was one of the important points that you said regarding leadership. You said, liberation begins in the minds before it manifests itself in political institutions, right? Now, within the ANC, as you've spoken about ethical leadership, and the ANC realized the importance of ethical leadership when they then started the Integrity Commission, right? And we saw that there was the step-aside rule, whereby a member, when he's either being charged in High Court or on his own accord, he feels he needs to step aside so that the ANC can continue its work. That is to be done. Your views on the current step-aside rule, do you think it has been, or the integrity of the ANC itself?
Well, I think what is important is that every organization, the ANC included, is guided by its basic principles that are contained in its founding document, which is the Constitution. It is therefore important that those who deviate from normal protocols of the ANC are deviating from the course of action that puts the ANC into disrepute. They need to step aside so that they should not bring the ANC into disrepute insofar as their misdemeanor is concerned. So we need to support that. That is a very good principle.
Last question, Mr. Hadebe. There was a constitution making before constitutionalism. As you said in your lecture, that it happened in 1955 in Congress of the People through Freedom Charter. And hence the constitution belongs to the people, right? You touched something about the difference between parliamentary supremacy and constitutional supremacy, wherein in parliament, once the parliament has decided, you can't take it to court unless you're taking the process, but you can't, the law itself, you can't question it. Now we have seen as the ANC-led government, that in some cases we've seen the likes of DA, we've seen a lot of NGOs taking our own decisions, the ANC-led government decisions to court, which somehow it has led to other people feel this is counter-majoritarianism. Your views on that? Do you think maybe we should reflect and look at the values that the likes of Chief Luthuli stood for? Did they stood for this kind of value system wherein even as the leader of the society, we are being taken to court for whatever decision that we take that we think are in the best interest of the society? Or it's okay, we should stick to the constitutional democracy character?
Let's briefly explain why we decided on constitutional democracy. Under apartheid rule, the courts were supreme in South Africa. No court of law could question the validity of any act of parliament. That's what we call parliamentary supremacy. But in a constitutional democracy, the constitution reigns supreme. The law is supreme. That is why the government is not beyond the constitution. Parliament is not beyond constitution. Even the judges are not beyond the constitution. Everybody is subject only to the constitution and the law. That basic principle protects the democratic rights that all South Africans have. So it is important, therefore, that we should not deviate from that constitutional principle of separation of powers with an independent judiciary that is only subject to the Constitution and the law.
Thank you so much, Mr. Hadebe.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Okay. Are we still on? Okay. Second speaker, Mr. Ned, you can come.
Oh, thank you.
You can hold this one.
Are you ready?
Okay, my name is Komoto Sepe.
Good evening, Comrade Komoto.
I belong to this ward. I've been belonging to us for long. And it's an honor once again for me to be the host of these interviews so that you can understand from the veterans, the elders, those who have been in the forerunners of the struggle, and so that they can guide us where we're coming from. Your views on the kind of and the insights that you may draw from the keynote address.
Yeah, no, I thought Comrade Jeff's paper was excellent. It gave us great guidance, it gave us a great sense of history, and it helped us to map out the future, the path going forward. You know? So all those things that he spoke about, for example, the Freedom Charter. In 1955, there were a whole range of demands determined by the people of this country, by a democratic process. Then in 1987, the ANC came up with constitutional guideline proposals. Now, if you look at our constitution today, it embodies the Freedom Charter demands and it encompasses the constitutional proposals. So the constitution is a transformative document. All the subordinate legislation coming out of the constitution is in line with what was said in 1955 and in 1987. So that to me is the greatest deliverable of the ANC. We delivered on the Freedom Charter and the constitutional proposals. And we still have a constitution that is very transformative. If you listen to the judges in court, they tell you that the constitution is a transformative document. And that's the value that we have when we talk about a constitutional democracy, because in essence, we are implementing the will of the people, not a parliamentary democracy, which is the decision of 400 people. There's a big difference. So that's why we pride ourselves on the constitutional democracy, and we have got a strong rule of law, which is admired by countries around the world. So when it comes to the strength of our constitution, the strength of our rule of law, we stand head and shoulders above many, many countries in this world.
Okay. Yo, what did they say? No, that's great insight that I'm drawing from there. Now, talking about the power of the constitution, some view the fact that we elect our leaders, we elect the party system, and in the parliament and in our various legislatures, that's when they elect the mayor That's why they elect the premier and the president. They feel like it's not a direct democracy. And they contract this with what's happening in the countries like where they've got presidential system. The Southern America, most of the countries, if not all, is presidential system, just like in United States of America. Do you think maybe South Africa should also be heading towards that, owing to the judgment that was, I think, awarded 2 years ago at the time where they had to introduce the third ballot, whereby we can have independent candidate? Do you foresee a possibility that in the future we can have a president being elected not coming from any political party but independently?
Yeah, no, I think the party system must remain for this one reason. We are still in a mode of struggle as we speak today. The struggle continues, and the struggle continues to achieve the objectives and goals of the National Democratic Revolution. We haven't achieved all the goals yet. We are still struggling every day. We get new challenges, and the expansion of allowing independence to come in is really the interpretation of our constitution.
Yeah.
That is not just political parties, but independents that don't want to become part of political parties, and that's set out in section 19 of our constitution, that everyone has got the right to vote and a right to stand as a candidate. So that's what that is all about. So that's just an extension of our constitutional guidelines and the constitution, the strength of our constitution. But we must remain with party discipline, because we can't have this. Other countries appoint presidents separately from legislators. We're not there yet. We're still a maturing young democracy.
Like the way that we've seen executive orders in America.
We're going towards the goals of the National Democratic Revolution, which was set many decades ago. So we're still maturing, and until we mature, we need the party system in this country.
Mr. Naidu, last question from me. Maybe it's a controversial, but we need freedom. ANC fought for freedom of expression, all those freedoms, you can name them. You've touched something about the values of democracy, that one of them is non-racialism and non-sexism, right? I think it's a value that also guides the enactment of any laws in the country, right? If you look at the ANC, because it's the one that has been leading this value system, you look at the last ANC conference in Nasrec, the NEC proportionality when it comes to inclusion of all black or even white, it has somewhat, and I think I also hear from some of the ANC members that somehow we have drifted from representing the entire population to being more of African. Do you see the ANC going into this election and in future drifting towards African black, or do you still see it as an institution, as an organization that will still be composed and constituted by all racial groups?
Yeah, I think it's an important question. Firstly, because if you look at our constitution, the preamble of our constitution, country, you can look at the preamble of the ANC constitution. The objective is to create a South African nation. All the people that live in this country, not just African people. One of the weaknesses of the direction of the ANC has moved is now morphed into what I call African organization. But we need to fight back and remind the ANC that we need to go back to the principle of non-racialism. That requires struggle. Everything is contained in struggle. If other groups outside African groups become complacent, then they're going to be left behind. And they must fight for their space in this new democracy that we are continuing to build. And what is important to bear in mind is that when it comes to groups outside African groups, whether it's Indians, coloreds, progressive whites, they all paid a blood price for the freedom today. That's very important.
I remember you remind me of UTF. Okay, but I can't let you go before I ask you this last one. So I promise it was the last one. What from the legal point of view, legal perspective, what do you think of a party like MKP that has never went to any Congress, And we are in a democratic, constitutional democracy, right? Is it aligned with our democracy that you can have a party that doesn't have elections? Is it okay? Or, because somehow it sounds weird to me that the IEC doesn't have any, don't we have a provision in the IEC that says every political party registered in South Africa should undergo such?
I don't think the IEC can dictate that to political parties. All political parties manage their affairs, it's entirely their business. The IEC just has certain minimum standards that you have to meet in order to register as a political party. All standards are independent if you don't form a political party. But the important point is this, coming to your question, is you will get many, because of the strength of our constitution and our democracy, anyone can compete for power in this country. So you'll get all sorts of groups, individuals, entities coming forward. But the strength is going to be these parties will come along, will be there for a period of time. They are weak structures.
Thank you, Mr. Nedu, for your insights. Thank you. Thank you. Okay.
So, are you finishing your interviews now?
Anyhow, because I was told that I can, maybe we need to identify others that are here to use also. But you guide me as a product.
Do you still have someone to interview here?
No, I can interview.
I think we need to close.
Thank you, comrades.
Understand. Okay.
So now we are just going to proceed to the second last part of the program. We are going to receive reflections from the comrades and veterans, both of which are seated next to me.
Maybe one question or two folks.
Krishna, who's our branch legal expert. Just an interesting story. While we were planning this program as a branch, I happened to mention it to comrades who were seated just here and having a BGM, and he said, "Oh, that's interesting."
No,
actually reached out to try and get some assistance with the case. And when we attended at UNISA, again, it was repeated that the family has been trying for so many decades. So we are quite looking forward to his reflections, because this is a case that is well versed in. Comrade Krish will just give you 10-minute reflections, and then Comrade Maring and I can also provide reflections from the perspective of veterans and what the Luthuli legacy means.
But I think I'm not like, there's no more mics.
Well, yeah. The leadership of the branch, and also acknowledge the leadership of the region in Gauteng. And of course, Comrade Jeff, our leader. So I want to briefly talk about three things around Inquest Act, how does Inquest work, when do you have an inquest, talk a bit about my reflections on the Luthuli inquest, and also try and get some understanding of what the Luthuli inquest means for future generations. That's all my brief. But I want to precede that discussion and some input from my side to locate this discussion that I want to talk about. Firstly, the first point I want to make is that we have not come to the end of our struggle. We are still in the mode of continuing our struggle, and that's something that we must remember. We have not achieved fully the goals of the national liberation movement. So every day as we sit, even in we are still in the mode of struggle. That means we must not become complacent. Because if we become complacent, we are going to lose power in this country. And we're going to get people that are going to be ruling us that have got no clue and the sacrifice that people made to get to this point of liberation today. So that's the first point. The second point is, Comrade Jeff spoke extensively about the Freedom Charter. Now, that was one of the probably the most democratic meetings in the country in 1955, when the demands of the people were put down in the Freedom Charter. 7 by the ANC negotiations. 6.
It's too far.
And the
I didn't see my mic is too far, there's no sound.
Our constitution today always demanded found that the constitutional guidelines have been incorporated into our constitution, and all subordinate legislation was closed. Talk of transformation and continuation of struggle, we must understand the Constitution as a transformative document. It's there to transform society to higher levels till we get to the goals of the national liberation output. So those are the early foundation I want to put here before I go into the 3 points I was asked to discuss. The first is about inquest. Now we have an act called the Inquest Act that goes back to 1957. And normally an inquest, the state holds an inquest when somebody dies of unnatural causes. In other words, by accident, or by murder, or by poison, or any other unnatural cause. So the state then has an inquest to determine the cause of death of that person. So they would appoint a magistrate to hold the inquest. They will gather all the evidence around the death of that person. And at the end, they will determine whether there was anyone criminally responsible for the death of that person. Sometimes they will find that, look, we can't make a determination, or they will make a determination finding no one criminally responsible. And I'm making this point in the context of what happened in the Luthuli inquest. Now, if you remember in 1967, when this inquest made an outcome, they found that no one was criminally liable for the death. It was an accident by a train, etc. But if you look at the history at the time, the white officials of the South African Railway and Harbour played a big part in the death of Luthuli. They actually assisted in killing this leader of ours. Secondly, the medical professionals at the time, that were associated with the state, gave evidence that was against their own ethics, that oath of the Hippocratic oath that they take. So you have this convergence of railway and harbour officials that lied to the inquest, and you had these medical people that lied, and as a result they found it was an accident, and the truth came out in October after new evidence was laid. There were some witnesses that saw President Luthuli at the hospital when he was taken from the accident scene to the hospital, who found certain abnormal happenings at the time. And a lot of that evidence came through in the inquest. With the result, the presiding judge found that that decision taken 59 years ago was wrong in law. They set it aside, and they made a new finding that President Albert Luthuli was killed by security officials. Now, what's going to happen now is there's going to be a determination of who actually participated in that killing. Now, many of these people would have died, but those that are living will have to face justice in the future. So that's why I keep saying that we are in continuing struggle in this country, because we are always trying to search for the truth, and we are correcting records that were set incorrectly in the past. Now, what's the reason for that? Look, we have to provide guidance to future generations. Young people that get educated, eventually get jobs, become part of the economy, that settle down in families, and we need to show them that as a strong government with a constitutional democracy and a strong rule of law, that we are here to protect their interests in the future, because they will want to know, are you protecting me as you correct in the past? And that's the lessons of correcting the past, to show the future generations that you are here to protect them also. And that's when people buy into your democracy, they believe in your democracy. And we also have a thing called restorative justice in our democracy. We go back sometimes to correct things that happened a long time ago. And I want to just give you 2 examples of cases where we correct. One was a case around 1800. It was a piece of land in Grahamstown, as it was then, it's Makanda now, where the Xhosa community in that land occupied it for a long, long time. And then the British government came along and gave that piece of land to some white settlers. So there was this tension between the community and the settlers. And that matter carried on for a very long time until the Constitutional Court in 2013, that's about 13 years ago, took a decision that that decision was wrong to deprive that community they had before the white settlers came, and that they must now enjoy the rights of that land together. You see, that's corrective justice, restorative justice. Another example I want to give you happened about 100 years ago, and that's the Muslim burial sites on the foothills of Table Mountain, Cape Town. A certain part was reserved for burial of Muslim people, and that tradition was carried on for a long time until the council decided to take away that land, dig up some of those bodies, and give that land to private white developers to develop buildings, etc. The court in 2004 gave justice back to that community. So the reason we have restorative justice in this country is that people must get confidence in the government that, you know, we can't go forward harboring the fact that I was done an injustice in the past and nothing is done about it now. Government's job continually is to look at how we fix these things, how we give justice to people that were denied justice in the past. So that's why I say we are continuously in struggle mode, and we're going to be in that mode for the next generation or two. I mean, you know, liberty and freedom doesn't come easily. We're fighting a struggle over 350 years. It may take another 50 years or so to get to the point that we want to get full rights for everyone. So we must not be complacent. We must fight. Even local government elections, that's the starting point. We have to take charge of this area so that we can determine what the people of this area want. If you look at other parties, they look at providing goods and services to a specific section of areas. If you look at the way some communities in Cape Town have been deprived of certain public goods because the governments in those local authorities are looking at a sectional delivery as opposed to a universal. So those are important. That's why we must not become complacent. Now, going back to the Inquest Act, what happens is the magistrate decides, looks at all the evidence, looks at what, think of a scale. That's how I think of justice. You think of a scale. If the scale goes on one way, you make a decision. If it goes on the other way, you make a different decision. So a magistrate or presiding officer looks at all the evidence and then decides, I think this person was killed or died of unnatural causes, and these are the people responsible for that death. That's really the purpose of an inquest. Right, so they go through the evidence, they go to hard evidence, not just allegations or rumor or speculation, but real evidence. And the judicial officer then has to make a decision, weigh up the facts and say, what is true in the search of justice do I make in this inquest? So restorative justice, beside the Luthuli case, think of the Amatumol case. There's many, many other cases where frivolous reasons were given for people being killed. Think of Steve Biko. Think of one case I heard of where somebody slipped on a bar of soap and fell and died, you see. So those things, we need to give justice back to people. Something that I came across about 7 or 8 years ago when I worked at Luthuli House, we found a mass grave on the south coast of Natal. Initially, we thought these were activists that were killed and taken out of society. But when we went further into the case, we found that these were farm workers killed by the white farmers, buried there, taken out of society. No one knows who these people are, what explanation was given to their families, but there were about 50 bodies in this grave, you see. So that's why when we talk about strong democracy, constitutional democracy, rule of law, we must protect future generations. So we must not allow what happened in the past to future generations in the future. There's an expectation by young people and even unborn generations that we have a duty and an obligation to protect their rights going forward. So when we leave, we must have left our democracy in a much stronger position than it is in today. That's what struggle is all about, the continuation of struggle as I understand it. Then the importance of this Luthuli inquest is, we must send that signal to future generations and young people that even if a leader of an ANC, of an organization like the ANC, could be dealt with in the manner that Luthuli was dealt with so many years ago, we are here 59 years later to correct that historical miscalculation or lie. We had to, and that's very important. So it must give hope to future generations, to the population of this country. No matter what happens, we are here to protect the interests of everyone. And I just want to finish off with 2 examples. I was part of the military establishment at Arms Corps, and I remember that before the talks began in this country, one of the demands of the Americans and the Europeans was that the South African government must dismantle the 6.5 nuclear weapons they had developed at Pelindaba. And that became one of the preconditions before even talks started, for the simple reason that the West and Americans did not trust black people with nuclear weapons. Right, they thought as soon as we get into power, we're going to blow up the place. That didn't happen. We even signed non-proliferation treaties as the ANC government in the new democracy to show our good faith. The second thing is there was this fear that there was going to be a wholesale land grab in this country as soon as the ANC came into power. So that's why at the negotiations at CODESA, they put great effort into putting lots of layers of accountability into Section 25. It's still a very progressive section if we use it properly, but there was this fear. And I should say that in 2009, we had a 69% majority, if you remember, electoral majority, yet we took no steps to change the constitution. So that's the good faith that people don't talk about the ANC, that we did not renege on agreements that we made. We did not take advantage of the fact that we had a majority. We could have changed the constitution in many respects, but we didn't. So that's the strength of, as an organization, strength of the constitutional democracy and the rule of law that we've set in this country. We cannot take it away. We should not weaken it. We must continue, move forward, and make it stronger and stronger so that future generations can rest assured that we've left them something that previous generations paid for with their lives, with imprisonment, with being bludgeoned to death. That's the historical of struggle. Thank you.
Amandla. Greetings. I know it is very late. But I'm audible. Okay, yeah. You can hear me. Yes. Oh, production. They took it. Yeah. But while they are fixing, let me acknowledge that we have been we are so pleased for the camera. For the camera.
Because it's sounding for camera. We won't hear himself while it's working, but it's for the camera.
Shut off. It's on now.
Yeah,
Can you use this one?
Let me first put a disclaimer. My disclaimer is simple. This is the veteran that when we were arrested in the 80s during the struggle, in the Far Eastern Transvaal, he was instructed to come and stand on our behalf. when there were issues in Standard, Betal, Emelo, Makason, Leslie, and those surrounding areas. So he was my lawyer. It's so difficult because when he sent his team at some point trying to coach us how to debate our issues in court, and then ultimately he sent Simenya. He's now a senior counsel. Braish. So when he sent Braish, we were fighting in a sense that Braish will tell us and himself in that team that you are stupid. You are going to be sentenced if this is how you are going to present yourself. So I'm honored, I'm privileged because he stood for us. And during apartheid, at some point, they refused in the team in Standard 10 to stand for us. They rather went to an Afrikaner lawyer to represent us in Standard 10, simply because it was an issue of a language. So they decided, Louis Mania, that if they go, these Afrikaners are not going to listen to them in a proper way. So they get a white guy who was up, he stood for us. I still remember his Boer. He's now senior counsel is Boer. So he stood for us, and thank you very much for this privilege. But let me go to the Luthuli leaders. Standing here, the shoulders of the legacy that was put before us by leaders who were selfless. Leaders who did not at any given time say, I am available. Leaders who will at any given time understand that. That's why Ubab Khadebe, when he's presenting, he says, yes, you knew very well that you have to cross. There's a cross there. It's either you are going to die or you are going to be arrested. So now, here is the issue. Are we now looking at the legacy of Luthuli or Nikezela, who stood up and said whether it rains or what? You know, most of us, if we were professionals like him then, would. Let me go and continue with my teaching rather than getting into the struggle for the people. So now, I want to say, as the veterans now of the ANC, for those who do not know, veterans of the ANC, you must have 40 years of unbroken record for you to qualify. It was not an easy thing. Now, once you have qualified, there are now issues of principle. You must be seen to be beyond reproach. We are now as veterans, ours, that's why the Honorable is speaking with no fear of any contradiction, because he does not have an interest to become a president. He's gone past that stage. He will tell the truth, speak truth to power. Now, if we're still saying the ANC is a leader of society and is an agent of change, we've got the responsibility. Younger generation. Guiding it in which way? One, if we are an agent of change, the child will suffer without a birth certificate in the house when we are leaders of the ANC. We don't resolve that. There's no challenge of community where we live, where it will go unresolved. It means the responsibility of us, is to make sure that the ANC is recognized. If you ask me during those years, ask Chris, they will tell you When people see you wearing a t-shirt of the ANC like that, they will all come to you and ask many questions, because they will see the ANC as a leader of society and an agent of change. Now, can we still today, when they see us, they say, we are corrupt. Whether you have done something wrong or not, because they read newspapers, they listen to everything that is said, even if when you have not been found guilty, once it is pronounced, no, you are corrupt. Now, I want to say this. Now, what is then becomes our role? He spoke about the formation of South Africa, Union of South Africa. Then you take that establishment, that's history. Now that history, he has said something that is very fundamental. One is that if we don't know where we come from, we will never know where we are. And we will never know where we're going. So it means, in as much as we speak, we say, this younger generation are not going to feel comfortable telling them about the history of the ANC and all that. But they must know where we come from, so that us sitting here in this battle today, it is very critical that people should understand it was the Luthuli who stood up and fought so that we enjoy. So we are sitting on what they fought for. Some of them, I can tell you, some died in prison. Some, they did not even come back to South Africa. Even today, they are not known. Some of us are, temporarily insane because of what we have gone through. When we survived death row, I survived death row, and people would think, what happened? It is the ANC-led government that stood up. TRC must be established. He spoke more, Ubaba spoke more about, truth. He spoke more about having a vision. Ubaba Luthuli had a vision. And his vision was not for him. He even says, if you read history, he never saw borders. He did not even understand the issues of borders. Which borders were created by who? By the colonies. We were colonized. So now, without wasting your time, I just want to say, our role as veterans of the ANC, I'm an REC member of the Veterans League in Johannesburg. Now, what then becomes our role? Our role should be, one, democratic centralism must be seen to be in place. When a leader, councillor candidates, we fight over views. When a view has emerged, it is no longer a view of an individual, it's democratic centralism. That is why the late Chris Hani had to say, may his soul rest in peace. When he was instructed to go and tell the soldiers, this issue, we are dismantling this thing of armed struggle. Whether he liked it, but he said, the leadership of the ANC have taken decision. Can we say it today here, more especially here in Johannesburg now, of late? When a leader has been elected, because we become members of the members, no, it is not going to move because my preference has not emerged. So as veterans of the ANC, our role is to go to the branches of the ANC and call a spade as a spade, not a fork. Ours is to say, this is not the ANC that we fought for. And we must never be ashamed and we must never be afraid to tell the branches of the ANC that when a leader has been elected, rally behind the leader, because it's not all about Ubaba Hadeb, it's about the banner of the ANC that people fought for. The last part I want to say, ANC Veterans League is, we used to speak about veterans in the ANC, but finally the ANC took a decision. That is now why now go to conferences, all the provinces. Now you have got a leadership of the ANC that is, and its role is very clear. It's not to come and contest. It's contest, we advise. Until such time that no, now we need, because there's two things that we must clarify and make sure that this thing, it is natural death. Hakuna dustbin. There's no dustbin in the ANC. We need wisdom in as much as we want younger generation to swell the ranks. We cannot have the younger generation swelling the ranks of the ANC when you say, "Ansabafuni bonke laba bahambe," because you lack wisdom. The reason why Luthuli today that we are celebrating led correctly, because bebakwazi ukuthi even in the ANC Youth League, when they formulated the ANC, they did not say, no, asifuni. They understood that these are younger generation. We've done petition, we've demonstrated what we wanted, we've gone to abroad Britain and negotiated. It did not give any new direction. Then let's allow. Then the Umkhonto we. That's why when Ubaba Hadebe says, Ubaba Mandela had to move, gave a report to Ubaba Luthuli. Because Ubaba Luthuli, it is not true that they did not want ANC, ANC Youth League. And it is not true that they did not want controversies. The truth is that they understood that this is another way of fighting the same battle that we want, democracy that we are now today enjoying. So my parting ways is to say, we are here as veterans of the ANC League to guide, to advise. Every family, Bab Hadebe has got an uncle, every family has got an aunt, and therefore, as Veterans League members, we are the aunts and the uncles of the ANC. Our role should be clear and it must never be misunderstood. So, Bab Hadebe, I so wish when you were presenting that this attendance and the listening that I've seen here attentively could go down to each and every branch of the ANC for all of us to understand where we come and what is then becomes our role. Because Lomkhonto, this shield that you spoke about, it needs all of us, it needs the younger generation to understand that siyanikezana, it's a hand. You give it to me, next time I give it to them. And when you give to the next person, you give support. So with those few words, Baba Hadebe, Baba Ngit, my lawyer, Bab Krish, I'm standing today because you were born before me, and I've joined you in the Veterans League, and I'm learning a lot from you. So Baba Hadebe, continue to do those lectures. Continue to share the most difficult part of our struggle so that we all understand. So Baba Hadebe is our person that we must utilize, and many others, they are sitting around us. Let us embrace them. I've said he's a wine, because when you look at him, you look at his age, you look at him. I see a younger generation. So with those few words, the Luthuli family, we are here, we are with you. Please, we need to support you. Let's support each other. On that note, I'm saying, Amandla Asema Sebeni. Thank you very much. Iyo langa selijonele. Iyo langa selijonele. Abafana bomkhonto betilanga, betilanga. Bomkhonto betilanga selijonele. Iyo langa selijonele. Amandla.
Thank you, comrades. As we close the program, Ukhatebe to lead the candle lighting ceremony by just standing in front of us, and then Comrade Auntie Pam, she's just going to lead us in song, comrades. And just for clarity, comrades, the branch, INkosi Albert Luthuli, felt that upon getting all the information on the inquest, that we should show our support to the Luthuli family and cry with them for the 58 years that they had to wait for justice. So we have with us here tonight a candle that the family and the ANC was denied justice, comrades. So I'll hand over to Comrade Anti-Payment to lead us in song.
Tina Sizwe Kalela Kalela Izwe Tatwa
I would like to thank the branch, Albert Luthuli, branch 32, Johannesburg region. This outstanding remembrance of one of the greatest leaders South Africa has ever had. Chief Luthuli's legacy must live on in our hearts, in everywhere we operate. He taught us that leadership is not entitlement, but it is service to our people. I'm also glad to see my old friend and comrade from Haiti, who played a very critical role in advancing the revolutionary struggle of the ANC. And prisoner next to me. So all this indicate that if together, the ANC will never die. Yes. So Comrade Pam, thanks for hosting us in your people. That may we ensure that what and our councillor candidate with a with those words, I'd like to say thank you. Keep on by keeping on.
Thank you. Very much.
Thank you. That is the end of our program. We can end in song. Thank you. Thank you.
Are we keeping the candles?
Yes.
Thank you so much. That is Tommy, Comrade Jeff. Please, Tommy Lydia. Then we'll come along. So, my Comrade Jeff. I'm Congo. Lydia. Lydia Mani. Kawe, osebenza kuphi? President. Thank you. Yes, it's a bomb. Yeah, the answer
Now stop the stream, man. Stop it.
I haven't stopped.
In the stream, man.
Sound. How come?
Just sound. Ah, you might have it.
To me. Let to me.
They have to be there, so see, like the man sound before.
Man, the best. But I'm calling it.
That researcher is still waiting for that interview. I'm trying.
Now, I'm about to say.
Just 3 minutes.
Yeah,
I was a
okay, I'm going
Yeah, I'm talking to them. Yeah. It's going to be the first one.
Only one camera. Something Ali.
What is the show? So,
Okay.
So they is over.
Sound. Lapho ya? Akula sound engenayo lapho.
This is fine.
HDMI 1 unokuqala ukungena isound.
Yeah.
Unokuqala ukungena isound manje. HDMI 1. Bisa sound.
Yeah, we can't do that.
Keep it. Dala libe sound.
Because otherwise it won't be fair if you are the speaker and you don't come here. You understand? Especially with that kind of understanding. You don't have those.
Okay. I don't want to break this. Hey, he must.
Let me see if I can.
Only one is fine. I'm gonna be audible, right? Good evening, sir.
Good evening.
Welcome to 132 podcast in the memory of one of our greatest leaders, Chief Albert Luthuli. We here to delivering one of the heartwarming lectures today regarding the legacy of Chief Albert Luthuli. You said something very profound, that he sacrificed. Can you elaborate more on him sacrificing for the country instead of only being a teacher?
I must say that Albert Luthuli's legacy has not been really pushed out for many to know. Unlike Mandela, if you go to the streets of any African country, you will know who Mandela is. But when it comes to Albert Luthuli and for the things he did for the struggle of liberating South Africa, that information, that knowledge has not been out there. In fact, sometimes I think if Albert Luthuli has stayed longer in his pursuit, and I've seen when others begin to take leadership like Mandela, I think he will have pushed for more African kind of liberation. Because you see, the ANC is not SANC, it's ANC, African National Congress. So back to your question about Luthuli, one of the strongest leadership skill that I still believe we must learn from is the ability to sacrifice. A good leader thinks of the next generation. A good leader thinks of the next generation. And Albert Luthuli is that man, that leader that looks out for the next generation.
It's a visionary.
It's a visionary. Now, he left his teaching profession that feeds his family. In fact, it was a struggle for him to leave his teaching profession and become a chief to serve the people. Because he gets paid, takes care of his family, but then as a chief, how is he going to now sustain himself? It was a bit of a problem before he took that decision for the people. And then he also left that same position because now he's working, they've recognized him as a chief. But now he has to leave also that position and transit himself also to be a political figure.
Now, I like what you touched initially, that his legacy is not so celebrated like Nelson Mandela.
No.
You reminded me, you coming from the academic background, right? You reminded me some time ago, SADU, the South African Democratic Trade Union that represent teachers, once make a proposal that every child must study history so that you don't forget where you come from. Are you in alignment with that suggestion? Do you think somehow, if in terms of ensuring that this larger society is conscious of our history in such a way that even the legacy of Chief Albert Luthuli can be celebrated, perhaps maybe we should ensure that from the primary to our high school we should have history as a subject, compulsory subject? Have you given thought to that idea? Do you think
history is very important. If you don't know where you're coming from, you don't know where you're going to. So the whole understanding of the South African revolution and the freedom fighting struggles, it has to be built on the history. You have to understand history. If you don't understand history, you don't know where you're going to, because the history defines the future. And indeed, I am so much in alignment with that suggestion that history should be taught in school. And if history is properly taught in the school the history of South Africa, then Albert Luthuli's name will be standing out. Because you can't talk about ANC without Albert Luthuli. He played significant parts. And that has not been celebrated so openly. And so teaching history in school will indeed be a very, very strategic way of pushing the narrative of him being that leader that helped made ANC what it is as a party that went far to begin to shake the foundations of the apartheid regime.
One of the contributions that Chief Albert Luthuli made was he was part of the 1952 Defiance Campaign and 1955 Freedom Charter in Cape Town. Now, one of the provisions in Freedom Charter was the doors of learning shall be open to everyone, right? If we look at what Chief Albert Luthuli stood for at the time, do you think as of now, accessibility to higher quality education, has it been realized through NEFSAS, or there's more that we need to do to ensure that we capacitate our future generation with the kind of education that we want? Or do you think there is, if there's accessibility, do you think the School of High Learning are now teaching our future leaders, our future engineers, our future professionals with the right tools to compete in the ever-evolving technological space we're living in?
Yes, I think so. I think, let me start from a part of your question to say to give, I don't know if you're insinuating to give education free to all.
Yeah, yes, that's what I mean.
Yes, that is doable and it's possible. So even Namibia is giving free education in Namibia. So I think South Africa can do that. If we put the house together and then make it as a policy and then work towards it, it's possible to get free education in South Africa. And I believe strongly that the educational system in South Africa, we cannot say it is perfect or like wishing is ultimate goal, but I think it's in a strategic place where more effort being put into it, it will become something renowned. A lot of South Africans are making breakthrough in education. In fact, research output in Africa, South Africa is #1. So we are doing a lot of research in South Africa. So education in South Africa is really, really in a good space, and just more funding is needed to push it more, and then, yeah, it will get to that point.
Last question, then I will let you go, Professor. The last one, very, very, in terms of ethical leadership, is one of the values that Albert Luthuli stood for, right? When there's been a lot of controversies surrounding our schools, higher learning institutions, like the institution, like what happened at Forte, whereby we hear that some of our politicians, they are buying their degree and so forth. Some question papers are leaked and so forth. What is your view on this leaking of question papers, this allegations of buying of educational material? Don't we have safeguard to protect the ethical academic training?
You're asking me a question that you're supposed to ask the Minister of Education.
I'm asking because you're from the academic background, and it's an issue that should charge you.
No, you said allegation. So,
yeah, it is allegation.
So the allegation is allegation until we have proper findings and the rest of it. But I would say that the educational system in South Africa is doing very well. It's doing very well. And of course, just like any other organizations, they have their own issues and struggles, and then they need to work around it and the rest. So, but in terms of education in South Africa, I think it's in a very good space, a good trajectory, and then more funding, it will go further.
Okay, thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you, Professor.
I'm leaving you now. Oh, the mic.
Wait, let me say goodbye properly.
Mengiqale iphume la. Ngimele iqale iphume la camera ukuthi ngivule.
And then where's the thing is?
Awu. Isitimi sa on